Welcome back, team. We're back for another episode of Cult Stuff and Chill. I want to start this episode off on a very important note. I don't know if anyone else is as into fundy snark as I am, but I just want to give big snaps to whoever arrested Josh Duggar this week. Finally seeing this man go to jail is going to be very vindicating, so we'd love to see it. I want to see the Duggar Empire fall, mostly just Jim Boob and Josh.
It does make me sad, the content of why he was arrested. Like, that makes me very sad, but it is vindicating because it's like we all kind of knew that that was possibly going on. And
while it is sad that that's why he's arrested, it's good to know that he is no longer able to be in home with his children. Because he clearly, he clearly cannot be trusted around kids. So I'm glad to see him out of that house. And I hope, Anna, I know you're not listening because our content very much not fundy friendly. I will say, I don't think they're our target audience. But Anna, if you're listening, just take the kids, girl, and get out of that Duggar compound. Like, you'll be better for it.
Honestly, can we revisit the Cannibal Island Gulag idea for him?
Please, God, he can be the first contestant.
For those of you not familiar with the Cannibal Island Gulag, it's there was like a gulag in Russia where they just dumped a bunch of people and like didn't give them food or gave them very minimal food, and so they started eating each other. Mm-hmm. So that's my personal, like, for violent sex offenders and child predators, they need to go to the Cannibal Island Gulag.
Look, can we televise it, and instead of calling it the Hunger Games, can we call it the Hungry Games? Josh Duggar's got some meat on his bones. He's a little chubby, so I bet he would be, like, tasty roasted over an open spit for those other cannibals over there.
So, to start my topic off, I'm going to ask you and our listeners, how do you feel about dolls?
Fucking hate them. Like, okay, when I was younger, I'm going to sidetrack already. So, I don't know if it was me or if, like, at some point an adult used to think that I liked porcelain dolls. But me and my sister had quite the collection, and we shared a bedroom. But for some reason, we had this doll cabinet, and then my bed was, like, my head would face at night at the doll cabinet. So there was this shelving unit that's literally like dozens of porcelain dolls that I would just be like a small child, like at night, like staring up in horror at the doll cabinet. And I fucking hate them.
I used to love dolls. Like, I was asking for porcelain dolls. I was like, these are so elegant. They are so fancy. Like, I would get them for people. I'm like, you need a porcelain doll. And my mom would be like, this is strange.
Okay, I'm going to really quickly sidetrack to, if anyone lives in Wisconsin or, like, is traveling through Wisconsin, go to House on the Rock. It's, like, this big mystery house that's built on the side of a rock, but there's one specific room that I have memories of visiting as a child that's literally, like, wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling porcelain doll room. And there's this one room where there's, like, literally a 3-story tall carousel, if I'm remembering correctly, but on each of the animals, it's a porcelain doll. So it's, like, not human size, but it's very tall and still very large, and it's each tier is just rows and rows of animals with porcelain dolls sitting on them. So highly recommending visiting that if you're ever in Wisconsin. But I could also be misremembering this because I was probably like 10 when I visited.
But the reason I ask is because today I'm going to talk about a very famous, allegedly haunted doll named Robert the Doll, which raises another question. Can dolls or other inanimate objects be haunted? Is this a case of like a non-human entity or dark energy manifested into a sort of golem by a lonely child? Is it the spirit or demon that entered the tiny fabric and straw body in order to enact its evil agenda? Or is it just the intense imaginings of a troubled young boy? Who knows? Maybe we'll find out. Robert's story begins in the early 1900s when a boy named Eugene Robert Otto, who went by Gene, was living with his family on Eaton Street in Key West, Florida, at a house now known as the Artist House. Gene was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll, who he named Robert, and dressed in some of his old clothes, which was a small white sailor suit with a cap. Some people say that the doll was given to him by a disgruntled servant girl who made it with the evil intentions of giving back at the family for some mistreatment that they might have doled out on her, and that with every stitch she'd filled it with like black magic and voodoo to bring disaster upon the household. But this seems like it's just more of a lore, a fable.
People wanting to assign like a scary story, origin story to it.
Yeah, and also kind of racist because they always specify it was a little Bahamian girl, like from the Bahamas.
Yeah.
But other people say that it's more likely that Robert was a birthday gift purchased by Jean's grandfather when he was on a trip to Germany in 1904. This seems like the more likely story because it's been determined that Robert was made by the Steiff Company of Germany. And that's actually the same company that created the teddy bear for Theodore Roosevelt. The doll is determined to possibly not have been intended to be like a consumer item or used by children. It was likely created as part of an elaborate window display with acrobats or something. And his grandfather basically just did the rich white man thing where he's like, everything has a price, and bought it because he thought it was cool. Regardless of where the doll came from, Gene fell in love with this doll. He didn't have a ton of friends as a kid, and he was kind of labeled like the weird, lonely kid that nobody wanted to really hang out with. And he talked to Robert and about Robert like he was a person and took him everywhere. Some would say that it was almost an unhealthy obsession with the doll, which I get, like being a lonely, weird kid, because I was kind of a weird, lonely kid. But it was almost taken too far, according to the people that knew him. Gene eventually grew up to be an eccentric artist adult. And I think that, like, if he were alive now, he'd definitely be diagnosed with some sort of neurodivergent condition. Back then, they obviously didn't have, like, the healthcare resources, and they weren't as accommodating to people that were different. So that might kind of lead us on one track of our story as to a theory about why Robert the doll kind of came to be. Gene's living in this house with his parents, and it wasn't long before strange events started to happen. The first thing that happened was kind of an intensely terrifying event that suggested Robert might be more than just a doll, and it was one night when Gene was around 10 years old. He was in bed asleep, and he awoke to find that Robert the doll was sitting at the end of his bed, which is not where he had been when Gene had fallen asleep. And that Robert was just, like, sitting there staring at him, he said. Gene then claimed that Robert started flipping the furniture, throwing his belongings around, and just, in general, causing havoc and, like, to destroy his room. At this point, Gene started screaming for his mother to come help him, which, luckily, his mother heard. She said that, like, when she woke up and heard him screaming, that she could also hear the furniture being overturned and stuff being thrown around the room, and just a general chaos going on. So she went to his room, and she found the door to be locked, so she had to, like, pry the door open to get into the room to find out what was going on. And when she did get into the room, she found Gene in the bed, curled up in a ball, terrified. She saw the room was destroyed, and she saw Robert the doll sitting at the end of the bed. And when she was like, what's going on, Gene, all he could say was, Robert did it.
At this point, if I was the parent in the situation, I'd be like, okay, and then that doll would be like, bye, in the garbage, dumpster.
Yeah, back then it was like, okay, is my kid just having an episode and blaming it on the doll? Because this did start to become like a common occurrence. Whenever something weird or destructive would happen, Gene would say, oh, Robert did it. And not all of it was believable. So some people kind of say that because Gene started to put all this like energy of blaming the bad stuff that was happening into Robert, that's why he came alive.
Yeah.
But there's different theories, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
So from then on out, it only gets weirder. Gene's parents claim that the following happened and that they witnessed these events. They claim that they independently witnessed Robert giggling, speaking, and his facial expression changing. They claim that Robert would run up the stairs, peek around corners, and stare out of windows.
Like they'd see him running up the stairs.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Or like they would see him just like peeking out from a corner.
The image in my head of like a stuffed doll just like running up the stairs, like, I don't know. The mental image I have of that is very much like the animated Winnie the Pooh, like the newly animated one, like the Christopher Robin, where the dolls all kind of move, like waddle a little bit. So like, yes, it would be fucking terrifying, but also like a little bit cute to watch it waddle up the stairs.
Yeah, and I think that he's like articulated at the hips, so it would, if he could walk, it would definitely be a kind of back and forth. They also claimed that Robert would move around and break things around the house and was just being destructive in general, and if they asked Gene about it, he would say, well, that was Robert. I wasn't even in the room. They also claimed that Gene would play and talk with Robert, but that they could hear a completely different voice responding to Gene. Which, this is fine. This is great. It could be a ghost or something, but it also kind of makes me wonder if Gene had, like, dissociative identity disorder or something.
Oh.
Where he had, like, an alter that he was kind of manifesting into this doll, and he was maybe using this doll to unpack some shit.
That's a really interesting idea because, like, DID is one of those things that I wasn't super, like, aware of or just didn't give it a second thought to until recently. And so there's, like, now online, both YouTube channels and, like, TikTok channels, I'm sure you've seen, there's the DID spouse channel. And it's super interesting because, like, when they are, like, introducing the alters, they all have a very distinct and different voice that's all coming from the same, like, physical body. And, you know, you can kind of tell that the inflection of the voice is a little bit different, and it's, like, the same body making it, but just, like, the tone and pitch at which each of these alters presents and speaks is very different. So I could see that as a theory, definitely.
Well, and, like, it kind of makes me think of that movie with Ryan Gosling, Lars and the Real Girl, where he was saying, oh, this is my real girlfriend, it's a real person, and it was a love doll.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same vibe. Well, and like I said, they didn't really have a lot of mental health resources at the time, so it was maybe just sort of a proper tool that Gene was using to sort of unpack the alter situation that he might have had going on, or maybe it was just him playing with it, because I remember being a kid and speaking in different voices when I was playing. Yeah. More often than not, it was just me speaking in a British accent because I thought it was really fun, but that's my personal theory on the whole thing. And it could be either the doll never had any power, or it could be that he literally put so much energy into it that it did become a haunted object with, like, the personality of his alter or whatever. Yeah. Regardless of the family's fear of Robert, being the stereotypical white family that they were, they kept the doll. After all of this, they're like, we'll just keep it. In fact, Robert was still around when Gene's parents passed away, and Gene, now an adult, decided, hey, I got this lovely house I just inherited. I'm going to move in here with my wife and Robert. So Gene and his brand spanking new wife, Annette Parker, also known as Anne, moved into the house. Anne was immediately made uncomfortable by the dynamics of her new household and the throuple situation with Robert. Gene had designated an entire upstairs room with a window as Robert's room, and this made Anne uneasy. Also, just the doll itself made Anne uneasy. She reported that there was something that she just couldn't shake about Robert. It just didn't sit right with her, and she didn't like the dynamic of how Gene interacted with Robert like it was a real person still as an adult.
This is why you need to live with someone before you marry them.
Exactly.
God, that's gross.
She requested that Gene take Robert and lock him up in the attic in the interest of continuing to get laid, you know, like happy wife, happy life. He's like, okay, I'll take him up to the attic. And Robert allegedly got pissed. So visitors to Gene and Anne claim that they would hear footsteps just constantly running back and forth upstairs, and they're like, what's going on upstairs? You have other visitors, and Gene and Anne would just be like, no. And then they could hear demonic giggling. There's still stuff being broken. The neighborhood kids claim that they could see Robert watching and mocking them from a window in one of the upstairs rooms. His room that he had been designated before he got locked in the attic. And so they went to complain to Gene, and Gene was like, okay, knowing full well and good that he had locked Robert in the attic, that like, Anne was not going to touch him. Nobody else was there. So he went to go look anyways, because he's like, I'm going to humor these kids, make him feel better. Well, imagine Gene's shock when he did not find Robert in the attic, where he had left him. He found Robert in a rocking chair in Robert's room that had the window overlooking the street.
Thanks, I hate it. Hate it. Again,
you'd say, just get rid of it, right? No, he did not get rid of it. Gene and Robert had this cycle where Gene would take him up to the attic, lock him in there. Robert would find his way downstairs to his room, stare out the window, freak out some kids. Visitors, the kids, whoever would complain, and Gene would take him back up to the attic, and the cycle would start over again. And this was like a fun little game that went on until Gene died in 1974.
Oh, Jesus.
He held on to the doll for over 70 years.
I mean, I guess if he's not, like, stalking you with a knife or something, if he's just like, oh, I'm playing peekaboo, like, I'm in my chair now, haha. But at the same time, like...
But he was being destructive to a degree. Like, he was breaking stuff.
Jeez. I would put that fucker in a 10-pound block of concrete and sink him in the bottom of the Mississippi.
Yeah, so in 1974 is when Gene passed away. His wife actually passed away 2 years later, but I think they sold the house after Gene passed away. And it passed hands a few times since the Ottos owned it. Now, there is a story that after one family of new owners moved into the house with their 10-year-old daughter, their daughter found Robert in the attic, and she was excited because it was a cool doll. She's like, oh, I'm a new free toy for me to play with. But that excitement was cut short when she started claiming that Robert was alive, could move around, and wanted to kill them. That seems to be just a story, though. Just another kind of urban legend story. Because it's claimed that the next owner of the house after the passing of Gene Otto, Myrtle Reuter, actually acted as Robert's caretaker for over 20 years until she got tired of his shit and eventually moved out and donated him to a museum.
That's so interesting that the doll just stayed at the house with multiple owners. Like, none of these owners thought to, like, get rid of the doll. They just moved out of the house. I'm like, Robert, you can stay. So, like, clearly they know this is Robert's house. This is not your home. It's Robert's world, and you're just living in it, sweetheart.
Well, and that's a theme that carries on even after he was donated. So, like, in 1994, that's when he got donated, and he was donated to Fort East Martello Museum and Gardens, and that's where he still is. Staff at the museum still report that he moves around, changes his facial expressions, and they can hear giggling, and sometimes they'll, like, see his hand on the glass, and then it'll move back real quick.
I am really surprised that Zach Baggins does not have this doll.
No, we'll get to that.
Oh. Ooh, yes, okay.
Visitors to the museum have also reported that when they try to take a photo of Robert, their cameras will either stop working, only to start working when they leave the building. And if they do manage to get a photo, the photos turn out blurry or unfocused, like Robert moved at the last second before the photo was taken. They also claim to have seen him smirk, move, or that his eyes follow you as you move around the room. Some have also claimed the thing with, like, the hands on the glass. So he's actually in, like, a glass case, and he's, I think, sitting in a chair, and he has, like, a little stuffed dog with him, too, now.
Oh, he's got a buddy.
Pet. They didn't want him to be lonely.
No.
And allegedly, Robert has rules for his visitors. You have to respect him and not mock him. You have to ask for permission for photos, or else. Many people have said that failing to follow these rules will cause bad luck. The museum actually keeps a full catalog filled with letters, emails, and cards of people begging for forgiveness after visiting and not following the rules and incurring his wrath, and they basically are just begging him to release the curse or hex that he's put on them. These people have reported that Robert has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, illness, and even death, which kind of makes Robert sound like Moldavite, honestly.
Yeah. Maybe his little beady eyes. I'm picturing him as just having, like, two little, like, sewn on eyeballs, and I'm picturing them made out of... Really? Okay, so they're probably made
black. Out of...
They're Moldavite, then.
Yeah.
They got Moldavite eyes.
Despite all this, he has plenty of fans, and he receives fan mail, candy, money, and sometimes even joints.
I'm a fan.
Most of, like, his caretaker, the museum's curator, Corey Convertito, she gets kind of upset because she's like, it's a doll, first of all, but secondly... respect it. It's still a museum. Mm-hmm. You can't just be leaving joints around. But she also acts as his PR team, basically, like, posting to social media, answering letters and emails on his behalf, and just putting out press releases and whatever, you know, to communicate for Robert. So he still has a caretaker. He still has a team behind him. And now he's, like, getting out to more people. So it's kind of the vibe that... yeah, Robert, like, had the house. He lived in the house. It was his house. But now he's out and he's a celebrity.
Yeah.
Once a year, Robert receives a checkup by Convertito to make sure that he's not in any need of repairs and that the Florida weather isn't taking its toll on the over-a-century-old doll. Because he is just straw and fabric.
Yeah.
So that's not really... Even then, they didn't... I think they used more of, like, cloth, torn up pieces of cloth to fill dolls, so that's why they think it was more of a set piece than actually meant to be a doll. So Robert clearly is enjoying his career as an exhibit and icon. And he's been exhibited at TapsCon, Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum a few times.
All right.
And has had episodes of TV shows and even a 5-movie horror franchise dedicated to him. So really, he's living his best celebrity life.
What is it? Chucky that's after him?
No, it's just called Robert.
Oh.
And then there's like Return of Robert. There's like 4 follow-up movies. Well, and I mean, Chucky is kind of loosely based off of him.
Okay.
Which honestly, I loved dolls as a child, but Chucky fucked me up. I distinctly remember a time when I was staying with my grandparents. They were just like babysitting me, and a commercial for Chucky came on, and I just started screaming bloody murder. And my grandpa ran in because he thought I had gotten hurt or something, and I was just like screaming because it scared me so much.
Oh no, poor baby
And
Ashley.
I don't know why.
Because
I love dolls.
Spooky looking dude though. He doesn't look like a doll. He looks like honestly, he looks like a pedophile but shrunken down in overalls.
So, despite whether Robert is cursed, haunted, or merely the manifested altar of a lonely and mentally ill child, Robert has become a sort of immortal icon, outliving many of the people who have cared for him over the years. So, that's the end of my story. What do you think?
I don't know. I kind of like your theory where he was like projecting, one of his altars onto this doll, and then that just like manifested into like an actual like the altar is now in that doll. But also I think it could very well just be like, I don't know,
like imagined creation.
Yeah. And then they were like, oh yeah, this is great, we can make money off of this, or like, haha, yeah, we'll just like punk the neighborhood and say that we have a haunted doll in our house and move him around from time to time, and now it's just like an urban legend that everyone subscribes to. But also, so there's another podcast I listen to called And That's Why We Drink, and they did an episode on Robert the Doll. And okay, I'm not gonna like totally drag the listeners of that podcast because I listen to it too, but after they put the episode out about Robert the Doll, they had all these people being like, even you mentioned him, and I was in my car when I was listening to that podcast episode, and I got into a car accident after you mentioned him. And so I think people are giving this doll like a lot more power than it actually has.
Well, and I think that's something that is kind of a theme among stories like this, is that the more power you give it, the more power it has. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I could blame my currently broken leg on the fact that I was thinking about doing Robert the Doll, vaguely. But it's like, realistically, I know it's just because things happen.
Yeah.
And,
the doll doesn't have a demon.
Ponies.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's not the doll demon, it's the pony demon.
Well, and I feel like with Robert the Doll, it's one of those things where if it is a real energy, just respecting it and talking about it, like, as long as you're not saying, oh, this thing is fucking shit, well, look at this motherfucker, I think it's fine. Whether it's real, whether it's not real, regardless, he's running the show, man.
I also would really like someone to go visit Robert and do like a mineral testing of his eyeballs and see if they are actually made of moldavite. Because that would explain a lot about Robert, I think.
I love it. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
I love stories of like Edwardian Victorian toys that have personalities of their own, because it's just like, I always wanted that. I always wanted to have a haunted doll. Except for, okay, no, I did have a haunted doll one time, and it was actually terrifying. So when I was a kid, I used to have a Goodnight Bubba, and it like was this weird like furry teddy bear thing, and it would say like golly, and just like was a super hick.
Yeah.
My grandpa got it for me because he's Southern. He's like, this is hilarious. That thing, we took the batteries out of it because it was like go off all the time, and it would still go off after we took the batteries out of it. And I put it under my bed, and it just started making like weird noises, which realistically, it probably was like there was a backup battery for when they do like the, press my hand, try me thing. And it was probably just dying, but it sounded like there was demons coming out of this doll, and it was terrifying, and I made my mom throw that away.
Okay, that reminds me very much of everyone that ever owned a Furby. Like, I remember everyone got Furbies one year for Christmas, and then, like, 2 weeks later, everyone's like, I put that Furby in the back of my closet because it wouldn't stop talking, and we took the batteries out, and I heard it talking in the back of the closet.
And then there was another time that I thought I had a haunted doll, but it was just that my mom had taken my doll to, like, get it repaired, because it was an American Girl doll, and, like, its leg fell off, but I was like, oh, she is gone. She ran away because her leg fell off, and I didn't take care of her. And then I told that to my mom, and my mom was just like, yeah.
That's what
happened.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it was, like, for Christmas.
Yeah.
And I freaked out, and I felt so bad. And, I mean, it was months. It was months that I just felt terrible. And then I got her for Christmas, and my mom's like, oh, you know, Santa must have found her. I'm like, bullshit.
Bullshit.
You took her out of my fucking closet, and you sent her off to the doll hospital to get her fixed, and you just didn't tell me. But anyways, that's the end of my story.
Yeah. All right, Robert, if anyone gets into a car accident or breaks your leg or has a streak of bad luck this week, we can all blame it on Robert and thank Ashley for bringing that into our lives.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. So, okay, for my story today, given that it is when the listeners are listening, yesterday, assuming we get our episode up on Thursday, yesterday would have been Cinco de Mayo. So, I wanted to pick a story that was from Mexico. I ended up on a serial killer, so I don't know if that's going to be, like, insensitive to be like, happy Cinco de Mayo, here's a serial killer from Mexico. But, I don't know. This is kind of a fun one and an interesting one. So, I'm going to tell you about a lady by the name of Juana Barraza, a.k.a. the Old Lady Killer. So, Juana, she is born in Hidalgo, which is a rural area north of Mexico City. And actually, let me just issue my disclaimer right now. Again, this is a story that none of the people or places are in the English language, so I really apologize ahead of time. I think I can get the pronunciation of these ones a little bit easier than, like, the German ones, but just bear with me. It might not be perfect, and I know that.
Your 2 years of Spanish really coming in clutch here.
Girl, I took French. I've never taken a year of Spanish in my life. I tried Duolingo one time, but that fucking owl used to, like, annoy the shit out of me. So...
He haunts your dreams.
He haunts my dreams, and he just, like, pops up on your phone randomly and is like, you're not doing your lesson today. I'm like, I fucking know, Duolingo owl. I don't have time. Back off. But anyway, here we go. So Juana, again, born in Hidalgo, which is a rural area north of Mexico City. Following the trend of, like, all of the other fucking psychopaths we've talked about on this show, she's got some pretty intense childhood trauma. So I'm just going to go ahead and issue a trigger warning here, because obviously this is a murder story, so we're going to talk about murdering people, but we also have to start it off by talking about a little bit of child abuse and sexual abuse, so I'm sorry. Feel free to skip ahead a few minutes if that's sensitive for you. That's the only warning I'm going to issue here. Juana, she grew up in pretty severe poverty, so, like, she didn't get the privilege of receiving any sort of education at all, and so she actually never learned to read or write. And she also never got to know who her biological father was. And so, like, all of that on its own is enough to cause some, like, I wouldn't say trauma necessarily, but some issues developmentally. Maybe affects her, like, self-confidence or her ability to really maintain a job or anything as an adult. But that's, you know, very mild compared to the rest of what happens to her. The worst part of her childhood was definitely having to deal with her mother. Her name is Justice Amparo, and this woman, she was just fucking terrible. So, like, she was not only an alcoholic, she's, like, a severe alcoholic, but she would just beat the shit out of Juana at pretty much every available opportunity. That's, you know, enough in and of itself to give her some serious mommy issues. But then, like, this woman, this absolute shitbag of a mother, traded Juana for 3 beers to a man whom she didn't know. Obviously, this is, like, massively messed up, and Juana actually, like, despite the fact that her mom routinely abused her, didn't believe that even her mom would stoop that low. So she goes with this man and basically thinks she's being punked, and she is waiting for her mom and her stepdad, who she actually did have a pretty decent relationship with, so I'm assuming he was not also an alcoholic. She goes with this man and waits basically to be rescued by her family, and unfortunately, this never happens, and this man that she went with tied her to his bed, basically, for the duration of her captivity, and obviously repeatedly assaults her in his care. While in his care, Juana actually gets pregnant twice. Both of those actually resulted in miscarriages. It wasn't until 5 years later that Juana is able to get away from her captor. And after those 5 years, her uncle is actually finally able to track her down and remove her from this dude's care. And as it turns out, Juana's mom had actually lied to the entire family, including her stepdad, by saying that Juana had just run away with this man to, like, live her life or whatever. I'm just going to take a moment and give, like, the shittiest mother of all time award to Wasa Sempero, because this woman is, like, the fucking worst. And I sincerely hope that she's rotting in the ground. I fucking hate her. We all hate her, and I would love for her to come haunt me so I can just spit in her face and tell her how much she sucks.
Yeah, she needs to go to the Cannibal Island gulag with Josh Duggar.
Yeah, her and Josh Duggar, Cannibal Island gulag, and I hope they both are eaten first. After her time in this captivity, she goes on to have several failed marriages. She has 4 kids, and unfortunately, her firstborn son is killed in a gang shooting at the age of 24. We can see, obviously, Juana has a really shitty childhood, and that just, like, carries over into her adulthood, which is also pretty tragic. However, I still don't think this is going to excuse the crimes that she is committing in her future. I just think it's sort of important to, like, point out that she probably wasn't born a total fucking psychopath. She maybe had tendencies of it, but I think it's probably more of a case where it's, like, a product just of, like, a lifetime of trauma for her. In the 80s and 90s, Juana, she actually has a variety of different jobs. My favorite, obviously, and the most interesting, includes she actually toured central Mexico as a female luchador named La Dama del Silencio, which means the Lady of Silence. And so her outfit is actually reminds me a lot of the Pink Power Ranger. So the only real exception to that is that her mask, you know, like the Lucha Libre masks are very, like, elaborate, and hers is actually in the shape of a butterfly on her face. So it's, like, very pink and girly for a wrestler, and I kind of love it for her. And I couldn't find, and I did look for, like, her record, like her wrestling record of her matches and stuff to see, like, how well she did. But in the pictures of her, you can see that she's just, like, absolutely ripped. She's big, muscly lady. So I think that she probably could seriously, like, throw down with these people. She looks like she'd throw some smoke for sure. Apparently, though, unfortunately, there's not, like, a ton of money to be had in female pro wrestling at the time. And so throughout the years, Juana basically struggles to provide for her family and make ends meet for her 3 remaining children. So what she starts to do is steal from shops to provide for her family. And I feel like she starts on a slippery slope here where she's, like, stealing from shops, and then it just escalates to she's, like, high on meth, naked, yelling at a Circle K cashier. Like, didn't do that, but what I'm saying is you start stealing a Snickers, and then you're murdering people, which is very much her character arc here. So this is basically the point in her life where she goes from, like, a badass, like, trauma surviving female wrestling warrior lady to just, like, being the villain. Like, she's on her downward, well, she's not hit her peak yet. She'll be on her downward slope, but she's, like, building up to it. So I feel like this woman, too, like, her character arc could have gone 2 very extreme ways. She could have been a survivor of childhood trauma. She could have been a female lucha libre legend, and instead she just ends up being a fucking psychopath, which is fucking annoying, because she could have had a really cool story.
Yeah, like, we were rooting for you. We were all
rooting for you. And this is what you do. So Juana obviously sees that stealing from shops isn't exactly, like, slicing her cheddar the way she would like it to. She's not making enough money off of it. So her and her friend start to burglarize homes, specifically the homes of the elderly. What they would do is they would dress in white clothes, and they would pretend to be nurses to gain access to the homes of these elderly people. So they would pull this scheme off for a while, the 2 of them together, but eventually they get busted because, as it turns out, Juana's friend, she was in a relationship with a corrupt federal police officer. So basically he sees that the crimes that both his girlfriend and Juana are committing, and so the 2 of them, the friend and the federal officer, they extort Juana for 12,000 pesos in return for her freedom. So she loses all the money that they get from, you know, extorting these old people. And once again, Juana has been fucked over by someone she trusts. And this is where she really fucking snaps. Her murder spree, it begins after this extortion. And so she takes notes from her previous burglary scheme and continues to target the elderly. And so she later actually admits that the reason for this is because the hatred for her mother is just so deep that it actually fuels her attack on elderly women, because all the victims of her crimes would have been about the same age as her mother would have been. So she's killing old ladies because she's got some serious mommy trauma. Like we said before, she's using the tactics from previous where she's like gaining entry to their home by posing as a nurse or whatever. So she would pose not only as a nurse, but like she would pretend to be like someone from the city council that's there to help them fill out like their social security or whatever the Mexican equivalent of that is, that paperwork. And so she would get into their homes, and she actually somehow acquires like a genuine nursing uniform to help fool her victims. The murder of these elderly women actually begins in 1998. And when these murders happen, the police and press are just like really fucking baffled at what is happening. And they're actually speculating that the killer was a man dressed in women's clothing. I feel like they probably made this assumption for two reasons. Again, this is just me speculating, but the first was that witnesses often said that they would see an elderly victim with someone that looked like a man in women's clothes. But if you look at pictures of Juana, she's like, for a lady, ripped. She's not only, ripped from wrestling, but she is 5'7". So I looked this up. The average height for a woman in Mexico is 5'2". So she is taller than the average female in Mexico. And couple that
much taller.
Yeah, much taller. And actually the average height for a man in Mexico, I looked up, was I believe 5'6" or 5'7". So she's right in that height. She's got muscles, and she also has a very short cropped haircut. So I could kind of see where you would get that impression, honestly, just because she is taller and muscular. Again, that's speculation. I don't want to say that she looks like a man in the face, but I don't know.
But if you're looking at her from behind, like, and she's already kind of wearing a disguise.
Yeah, exactly. And so the second reason here is, I'm assuming it's because the murders were honestly just so brutal. The authorities just automatically jumped to the conclusion that it was a man, because really, in a lot of these murder cases, it's not a woman. It's a man perpetrating these crimes because men suck, I guess. They just assume off the bat, given, witness testimonies and just the nature of the crimes, that it's a man. So, again, and this could honestly kind of be some casual sexism on their part too, which maybe not though, because like it would take a certain amount of strength to commit these crimes too. So the average woman, I don't know that they could have done it, because again, Juana's ripped. She's a wrestler. She's got those wrestling muscles. Also, most serial killers are men. The first proven and reported murder that Juana actually commits isn't reported until November of 2002. So this is only the first one that they're able to actually pin her for. But these murders, again, they started in 1998, all with the same MO. In 2002, she enters the home of Maria de la Gonzalez Anaya? Again, sorry guys, my Spanish is not good. But anyway, this lady, she was fucking feisty. So like after Juana gains access to her home, Maria, she starts to make derogatory comments toward Juana and just like basically being like, you fucking bitch, get out of my house, yada yada. So Juana, she just gets infuriated and just beats her pretty much to death before fatally strangling her with her bare hands. And so actually, tying back into her wrestling career, Juana says that she uses moves that she learns during her wrestling career to subdue her victims before strangling them. And that was her MO. So she would, like, beat them. She would, beat them with a chair, like WWE style. That's just what I'm guessing. And then she would, with whatever was available, would strangle them. So either her bare hands, she used a stethoscope that was part of her nurse uniform, pantyhose, just basically whatever she could get her hands on. And then she would just rob the victim for personal gain and to obtain trophies. And after her first kill, so this one in 2002, the first reported one, she actually doesn't strike again for another 3 months. So it's at this time, right after this murder of Maria, that really the media picks it up and dubs this lady Juana as the little old lady killer. And this murder spree continues until 2005. As these murders are happening, again, authorities are just like scrambling to figure this case out, because old ladies being murdered left, right, and center. So obviously we want to figure out what's happening. And this search is on like Donkey Kong. But again, like there's just the witness testimony, the nature of the murder. They cannot find a reasonable perpetrator. It was also kind of complicated too, because there's just a lot of red herrings basically with the clues. So at one point, the police hypothesize that there's 2 killers involved. And then there's actually an odd coincidence that distracts the investigation, in that 3 of the victims actually owned the same print So it was like an 18th century painting, and all three of these little old ladies had this print in their home. They spent a lot of time like trying to connect the dots there to see like why would the murderer like have this vendetta against this painting. It's called Boy in a Red Waistcoat. So I'm gonna have to look it up and see if it's spooky looking or something. But anyway, yeah, so they waste a lot of time just trying to connect those dots. Obviously that ends up going fucking nowhere.
Well, it's like nowadays being like, oh, this person collects Ray Dunn. All these people collect Ray Dunn, so therefore it's connected.
Yeah. Like a generic print that you could probably have picked up at like Walmart or something.
Or like the Breakfast at Tiffany's poster that everybody had.
Yeah, they wasted a lot of time on that, and then in the time between 98 and 2005, actually over 40 elderly women are brutally murdered in their home. Over that span of time, they actually imprison like a handful of different men for these murders. Now, it's not ever proven hard and fast that Juana has committed all 40-something of these murders. So it very well could have been the case that some of these men that they put in jail were copycat killers and actually had committed those crimes. It's never proven that Juana did all 40, so it could be copycat killers, or Juana could have done them all because it all followed that same MO of like the brutal beating, the strangulation, and then being robbed. So authorities are also pretty heavily criticized by the media for dismissing evidence that a serial killer was at work in Mexico City, and they are labeling it as media sensationalism. So the media has picked it up. They've dubbed the serial killer as the little old lady killer, but the police are very like adamant, like, no, that's not a serial killer. It's just a string of random murders. And they are sticking to this story until basically 2005. And then soon after setting their investigation in motion when that first murder happened, the police also kind of fucked up because they launched a obviously unproductive and uncalled for arrests and investigations in Mexico City against transgender sex workers. So they are under the assumption that this is a trans woman committing these murders just based off the description. So they arrest a string of these sex workers, and it obviously leads to nowhere. It's just they're picking up these trans women just because they can, basically. Eventually, thankfully, the murders slow, and the police actually begin checking the fingerprints of bodies in the city morgues because they are operating under the belief at this point that since the murders have slowed, the little old lady killer might have committed suicide. Again, that goes nowhere. Obviously, that is not the case here. Finally, in January of 2006, so this is 8 years after the first murders occur, Juana is arrested, and she is actually fleeing from the home of her latest victim, whom she had strangled with a stethoscope. Like I said earlier, the witnesses at previous murder scenes, they had described a masculine-looking woman. Police had obviously arrested all those trans women and men dressed in women's clothing. However, when Juana is arrested, the authorities are actually like, oh, wait, I could see it. And so they admitted that Juana, being a muscular former wrestler, really closely resembles a composite image that the witnesses had come up with. So they had done one of those like crime scene drawings where they like draw the face of the person. So they're like, yep, no, that tracks, because not only the person in the composite had like a close cropped dyed blonde hair, they also had a facial mold that was very similar, and then the build obviously was what they were looking for. Mexico City prosecutors, they are able to link through fingerprint evidence at least 10 murders to Juana. Again, 40 of them are attributed to her, but just based on the fingerprint evidence, they can get at least a solid 10 off of her. So Juana actually only ever confesses to murdering 4 of the women, but denied involvement in the other, 6 that they had her fingerprinted at, and then completely denied the other 30 or whatever it is that, had happened in that span of time. So she tells reporters that she had visited her victims' homes in search of laundry work, so that she hadn't been there to murder them, she had just been there looking for work. Thankfully, she goes to prison. So finally, in the spring of 2008, Juana is tried and is found guilty. The prosecution had alleged that she had been responsible, again, for as many as 40 deaths, and she tells the police officer that her motive with the ones that she did admit to was lingering resentment regarding her own mother's treatment of her. So on the 31st of March in that year, she is found guilty on 16 charges of murder and aggravated burglary, including 11 separate counts of murder, and was sentenced to 759 years in prison. So bye, Juana. You in jail, lady. Good for them. Yeah, I love to see justice here. Now, I would be curious to see if those cases of murder, like the other however many it is that they can't actually pin on her, if they were able to solve those eventually. We know that she's in jail for 759 years, so even if she did commit them, like, she's not going to be able to go out and do more.
The elderly are highly susceptible to being robbed because criminals will case neighborhoods where they know there's a lot of elderly people maybe living on their own. Usually they go for women. So there's a chance that some of them weren't attributed to her. There's a chance that there was, like, copycat killers.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of sad because, like, not only do these elderly people have to worry about, like, being murdered in their home, but so, like, the Nigerian prince scammer, like, it's always the elderly people that fall for it. Which is sad, but...
Or your car's extended warranty.
Yeah, yeah. God, my band teacher fell victim to this at one point where his grandma got a call saying that he was stuck in Mexico. They were, like, pretending to be him. And they're like, yeah, I'm not going to say his name. This is Timmy, and I'm stuck in Mexico. Like, I can't get back. I don't have any money. My wallet was lost. And then so his grandma ended up sending, like, thousands of dollars to this scammer because she thought that he needed a plane ticket home to get out of Mexico. So anyways, so I'm going to wrap this story up. I like to kind of try and find, like, a story about these people's lives in jail. So, like, we know that my cannibal story, he became a vegetarian in jail and started working towards helping people with cases. We know that Ant Hill Kid's Mr. Roche, he was shanked by his cellmate, thank fucking God. But in Wanda's case, there's not a ton about her life in prison. However, apparently she spends her time there preparing tacos for the other inmates and selling them on the courtyards from Monday to Wednesday. So her specialty is a delicacy that is basically a slow-roasted spicy pork dish. So she... maybe not reformed, probably still has murderous tendencies, but apparently quite the chef in jail, so. She's got a hobby, and for that I can't fault her, because she's got 759 years to kill time.
She's kind of like the mixture of, like, Robert Ramirez and Eileen Wuornos.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Eileen Wuornos was kind of the same situation, was, like, sexually abused, and... But it is kind of strange, because she went after old women, and usually... I'm not going to say usually, because... women serial killers just aren't as common or aren't found out as often, but, like, they don't go after women, they usually go after men.
I like the idea that there are just as many women serial killers, but women are just smarter, so we get away with it more often.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with. Because I know plenty of women that I'm like, she would stab a bitch and not think twice. And they probably have and got away with it, so.
I mean, I almost stabbed that guy over an elderly cat the other day.
Yeah.
Although it was because he was road raging on me, so I was totally entitled to it.
I feel like, give us a brief synopsis of that story, because I feel like our listeners would get a kick out of that.
Okay, so I was driving out to check on my horses and feed them for the night, because I live about 45 minutes away from where I keep my horses. And so I was driving out. It was late at night, country road, the main road of a country road, but still it's a country road. And so I'm driving and through the town, and I see that there are cars stopped on the other side of the road. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? I should probably slow down. And I see that there's this elderly ginger cat crossing the road. And you can see that there's, like, people on the other side of the road. They're kind of, like, calling to him. So I don't know if he was their pet or whatever. But I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. Like, I'm not going to run over this cat. So this car, I think it was, like, a BMW or something, like a nice car, came up flying behind me, had to slam on his brakes to stop from hitting me, and just, like, started freaking out. Like, he started flashing his lights at me, he started honking at me, all in the span of, like, 30 seconds, and within, 30 seconds to a minute, he starts getting out of his car. Now, he's kind of, like, far behind me still, so it takes him a bit to get up to my car, and so I see him get out of his car. I'm like, oh, no, we're not having this. So I pulled out my machete, my trusty machete, I put it against my steering wheel, and I start dramatically unwrapping it, because I was like, I know I'm probably not going to have to shank this guy, but I should be ready just in case I do. And so he gets up to, like, the driver's side rear door, and he sees what I'm doing, and I can see his reaction in the rear, like, the side view mirror. I see his face go from, like, he's, like, angry, and then he's, like, confused, and then he's like, oh, fuck, and then he kind of goes back to angry, and he flips me off, and he, like, turns back and goes back to his car. I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Just imagine the terror of seeing, like, a 5'3" angry redheaded woman on the side of the road with a fucking machete. Like, that's enough to put it back
Well,
in
and
his
it's just a
BMW.
machete. It's a farm tool. I mean, it's not even particularly sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I did try to stab him with it, I don't know that it would do anything.
Well,
But it's just the thought.
yeah,
But
I
yeah.
still wouldn't fuck around with someone with a machete.
Well, and it's like, but he was getting out of his car. He was coming up to, you know, obviously try to do me some harm.
Mm-hmm.
He was very angry. He had angry steps. I was like, no, we're not doing this
Nope.
today, buddy. You can't intimidate me. So by that time, the cat did make it across the road. He did make it across the road safely. And I went on my way. And then the guy, like, was riding my ass for a while. And so I just drove very, very slow and just kept driving slow. And also I stuck my finger out, like, flipped him off out the window as I was driving down the road. And I really wish that I would have thought to, like, look at the cars on the other side. Because I really should have just looked to see what their reaction was. Because I'm sure that they could see exactly what was happening.
Yeah. They probably went home and, like, told their family, like, this woman with a machete.
This crazy bitch with a machete. And, like, I wasn't going to get out of my car or anything. I was just ready to defend myself. Like, you got to be ready to defend yourself. And for legal reasons, this is a joke. For legal reasons.
Yeah. This is all for, allegedly, for entertainment purposes only.
Yeah. It's a made-up story. I would never stab anyone.
No.
Anyways, on that note, you want to do tarot?
Yeah.
Tarot time?
Tarot time. I'm curious to see what the reading is this week, because I feel like there was the full moon, and, like, the vibes have been weird.
So, first off, we have the Queen of Swords. So, again, we've pulled this a lot, actually. This is our bad bitch. This can be an air sign. Just confidence, passionate about what she does. We pulled 9 of Pentacles, which is a good, like, this is bounty, this is kind of success and money. See, she's, like, nurturing her garden. So it's also, like putting in the building blocks to being successful. The next card I pulled is Judgment. So we pulled this a couple times, too, where it's, like, freedom. These people, they're going up to their sky lady. So this is, like, freedom, being able to have freedom within your passion, within, you know, making money within your passion. We have the Hierophant reversed, which is kind of going against tradition, going against religion sometimes. Kind of going off of revolting against tradition, becoming free, you know, building yourself. You have Temperance here, which is, like, bringing in balance and harmony into your life, and purpose. And then the only other thing is we have the Artist reversed.
Is he naked?
He naked. It's like Hermes, though. I think it's supposed to be, because he has little wings on his feetsies. So this is just, like, with all of that, you're still maybe a little, like, judgmental or greedy, or there's still some negativity that you need to work on, but overall it's going to be good. Like, you're working towards something, you're moving on the right path, you're working towards being sort of, like, free. So maybe this is meant for us.
I hope.
Or maybe this is about Anna Duggar.
Yes, this is for you, Anna. Get out of the Duggar compound. Go, run, fast.
Set yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm.
Be the bad bitch that you're supposed to be.
Girl, you could write the best tell-all of all time. You would be a millionaire.
She would be set for life.
Yeah.
I doubt she would, but that's what Jill's kind of doing now, isn't it?
I stan Jill Duggar because she is, like, on her Instagram talking about her sex life. Like, you could tell she's really just, like, happy not being in that Duggar fold as much anymore, and she's, like, really coming into her own, and I love to see it.
And I was surprised because I felt like Ginger just kind of, like, she wasn't as rebellious as, like, Jill, but, like, she put out that thing where she's like, we condemn all forms of abuse, we do not support Josh, like, this is not okay, we hope that, basically, like, everyone else's message was, like, we hope that the truth comes out, and, you know, he's rightfully judged based on what happened, not saying, like, he did wrong or right, but she's just like, we do not support him, We don't support this situation. We condemn all forms of abuse.
I do need to just, like, my heart goes out sincerely to those Duggar sisters that are probably being completely, like, re-traumatized from the events of their past, now this coming out. So.
Although, it's like, they do, to a degree, they are kind of brainwashed, I feel like. And they're kind of coming out of it, but I also feel like they're getting the vindication that they never had, like, the justice that they never had. Even when it did come out that he did it the first time, like, oh, he lost his job only to go work somewhere else.
Right.
Like, he was still working for politicians. He was working on Mike Huckabee's campaign.
I'm pretty sure when I was reading up about this, the 4 sisters did try to pursue a lawsuit, but since the statute of limitations was up on the actual acts, they weren't able to, seek any sort of justice or vindication on that. And so now to see him facing that punitive action, like, I love to see it. So good for them, but also I hope that they are doing well to take care of their mental health, because I know this has to be opening up those wounds kind of fresh, so.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's a bad situation all around.
It's a bad situation, but we can all be thankful that he is most likely going to prison, so. And if he gets off of this, you know that those Duggars have some sort of fucking Illuminati tie, because there's no way.
I mean, I always thought that they have had anyways, but if he does get off, I feel like he's got bigger things to worry about than, like, he might be safer in prison than he is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Out in the boonies, because, I mean, they're from what, Arkansas?
Yeah. Maybe that serial killer will murder him, too.
Or maybe he was a serial killer.
You know what? I think I told you this, but this was, like, before the charges against Josh came out, and I think I sent you this video where I'm like, okay, I know this is probably not what happened. However, there's allegedly that serial killer at work in Arkansas. Can you imagine if the reason Josh Duggar got apprehended was because he was suspected to be a serial killer, and, like, what that would do to the Duggar empire? Like, that arguably, like, crimes against children are fucking terrible, so I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but he would have gone to jail for longer, which is kind of fucked up. That you can do shit to kids and not go to jail for as long. So I feel like that's even almost worse in some cases, but.
I feel like any sort of, like, a violent sexual crime like that, it should be you just get life in prison. Because I think I've told you this before, too. There's a time and place for murder. There's a time and a place, not for sexual assault, but for just regular assault, like punching people or stabbing someone. There's a time and a place for it.
It can be many things. It can be, like, self-defense. It could be, somewhat.
Crime of passion.
Yeah.
Like, I can see that. It's fine. It's not the best, but I'll take it. But for the other stuff, no. There's never a time. There's never a place.
Yeah.
So.
Leave the kids alone. Josh, you sex pest. Get out of here. Anyway, so we ended that on, like, a positive note with the tarot reading and then got really sad there at the end. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to wrap it up here. So thank you for listening, guys. You can follow us on TikTok, on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. We have a Patreon. It's not really popping off right now. There's nothing there right now. So you can follow us on Patreon. Just don't expect a whole lot in the soon future. But in the not so soon future, we plan to get stuff going there. What else do we have? We've got a Twitter as well, so follow us in all those places. Link down below in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the bio. And we don't have a LinkedIn because LinkedIn is for bullshit middle management. So don't look for us there.
They're not comrades.
They're not comrades. Fuck LinkedIn. It is literally disgusting. I hate that app so much.
It's just a cesspool.
It's a cesspool of corporate greed and
middle
management. Exactly. Men in suits jerking each other off over their accomplishments that were all basically off the back of their underpaid workers below them. But anyway, that's my rant that I stole a little bit from you yesterday. But yeah, thanks for listening.
I did rant about that.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, she did rant about that yesterday, and then I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? Fuck LinkedIn. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye. Fuck you, Josh Duggar.